What's going on, everyone? MikeO back with another episode of Hobby Talk. It's been a year, but finally, Philmington is back. What's up, Phil?
Hey, what's going on, Mike? Thanks for having me on.
Definitely good to have you back. The last time we did a episode here on Hobby Talk, well, things were about to get pretty crazy, not just in the world, not just in our country, but in the sports card market. Things have gone bananas. We recorded just a few days before the whole pandemic kind of really took everything to a whole nother level last year, right before the NBA season was suspended, and then of course other leagues followed suit. Things went a little crazy, a lot of uncertainty in this country, in the world really. And that was true to be said about the sports card market too. Things, were unclear. No one really knew what to expect. Including both of us. I think we could both admit that there was definitely like a 10-day dip in the market as people tried to figure out what was going on, and then things exploded, and they've just kind of continued to grow exponentially. Do you have any words to describe what's going on, Phil?
Well, it's been almost surreal, especially looking back at it. It seems to me like it's very cloudy, but it seems to me like it's been more than a year that's passed. But yeah, I remember recording that initial episode with you, and we had to you had to include a blurb at the beginning when you posted it, um, because it was certainly a little tone deaf. I don't know if that's the right word, but it was additional context was needed given everything that ensued afterwards. We thought the world was going to end. We thought the hobby was going to end. Then all of a sudden it ended up being, you could argue, one of the better things that's ever happened to the hobby in a very long time. Now, probably not from everybody's perspective, because wax is almost impossible, if not impossible to find, especially at retail stores. But I think as a whole, it's been a positive for a lot of us.
Yeah, I mean, definitely if you had a sizable collection or an investment lot or whatever you had beforehand and you didn't blow it all out of the water during that 10-day stretch, you're obviously looking pretty good from that perspective. But I guess there's a lot of factors that went into the way things ended up developing. Not that we necessarily foresaw that, of course, because I think we were all kind of just concerned for ourselves, for our families, for everyone's well-being, and just kind of to see how things were going to actually go in the real world. And then now you can kind of take a step back and you look at it, and obviously a serious situation, but probably not as bad as it could have potentially been. Things certainly could have been much worse, even though obviously a lot of bad things have gone down, a lot of suffering for people around. But sports card collectors and investors and such, really not part of that group. So many different factors that ended up playing into it, and a lot of it was time. People had some more time to find things to do, so a lot of people had a chance to kind of rekindle their love of sports cards and their interest in sports cards. So that, plus, you kind of looked at it at the time and you're like, oh, well, are people going to have jobs and such? What's going to happen with the economy? And it turns out, of course, there were some stimulus payments and such, and bonus payments for unemployment. And I think those are, of course, factors. But really, the thing that I think we didn't really consider was how much money people would be saving from not going out to eat as much as they might, not blowing a wad of cash at the bar on a Friday and Saturday night, not going to sporting events, not going to movies and such. And it seems like a lot of that money went into sports cards. So those some factors you would agree with which helped kind of boost this hobby a little bit, on top of the growth we had seen over the course of years. It wasn't something that popped out of nowhere, but it definitely exploded onto a whole new level.
Right. Yeah. And over the last 3 or 4 months, people have been publicly calling sports cards and collectibles an alternative asset class. And I think the stimulus payments certainly help get some money in those areas into alt assets such as sports cards, cryptos, and other things. I also think that the low interest rate environment, people are less likely to put their money into a savings account to have it waste away, as the rate of inflation outpaces their interest rate with their bank. Yeah, there's a lot of positive factors here, and we're in what you could argue an inflationary environment with current fiscal policy, and people are looking for ways to protect their money. So that's when people look towards commodities or real estate, potentially cryptos, or maybe even baseball cards. So here we are.
And I think the more the momentum builds, the more people get involved. I mean, of course, you're going to have people truly interested in the hobby, truly interested in the cards. And we've seen that through little spikes with the 90s, the 80s and 90s stuff where people are kind of rekindling their childhood, buying back cards that they used to have in their collection or that they always wanted to have in their collection. But on top of that, the more press, the more exposure the hobby gets, which it's getting more than it used to. I mean, you'll see stuff about sports cards on MLB Network, NBA Network, ESPN. I've seen them. I saw them talking about that like $4 million patch auto, whatever it was, because I don't really follow the basketball stuff too much. Uh, I've seen stuff on Fox Business and CNBC, and you see mentions in different publications, and of course the celebrities out there. So you have a lot of other people, kind of with that are looking for a way to, of course, boost some cash. The flippers, if you want to call it. Some people, they just see the big numbers and they just think it's a get rich quick scheme, possibly. So more and more people are kind of flooding in, which is all just kind of collecting this mass amount of crazy momentum as prices continue to rise substantially and fairly consistency.
Yeah, and I think the advent of fractional ownership makes cards available to a greater um, amount of people, especially the higher end cards. I think in January we saw somewhat of a trickle down effect from a lot of a lot of those higher end cards that are getting scooped up, and people are thinking, well, a PSA 9 was X percent of a PSA 10 before, so that ratio must stand. And you see like the PSA 9 and making it up like base. Kobe Bryant, Topps Chrome, and Topps Paper rookies start to increase at a similar pace to the PSA 10s. And yeah, and then the rumor has it that there's investment groups that are buying up, deploying their capital and buying up uh, large quantities of cards at a high scale in order to fill their investment funds. So that's certainly a thing too. Um, I know you mentioned that some of these people have been making this mainstream, being featured on several TV shows. I saw last week, I was watching Good Morning America, and the Brady sale, the 1.3 million contenders championship ticket sale was featured on that. I've seen Golden. He was on CNBC. Gary Vee's been on CNBC a few times. I think Gary Vee's been not obviously a majority of the cause, but I think of all influencers, he might not have the greatest reach out of all influencers if you factor in Steve Aoki and some of the other more celebrity type figures that have stepped into the space. But I think he has his network is more likely to listen to him and to invest money based on his direction. So I think Gary Vee's been very influential here.
Yeah, he's got a huge audience of people who are extremely interested in the entrepreneurial kind of flip game, the buy and resell type of deal business kind of. Even if they're not experienced, they have that entrepreneurial spirit. So I do think he plays a role in people actually putting their money in. Of course, the other guys, more people hear about it and think about it, but they might get distracted moments later. Where I think the Gary Vee people might literally, while they're listening to him, be on eBay or whatever site, kind of doing some immediate research and thinking about it. So it's definitely not something I expected a couple years ago. I mean, I continued to see the hobby grow, and I thought it would continue to grow, but never at this pace. I never anticipated having people I know, start talking to me about cards and be like, I didn't even know these people knew like cards even existed anymore. So it's been nuts.
Yeah, I remember looking back at my collection before COVID and my mindset going into a purchase. I thought like, $2,000 was an incredible amount of money for me to spend on a card. But now it's like, it's peanuts. Now that equivalent sentiment is like for like an $8,000 card or maybe even more. I remember people responding to some of my videos when I showed some Soto stuff that I picked up for $500-600, saying like, "Wow, I guess I haven't been fortunate enough to spend as much as Philmington does on a single card. I'd never be able to do that. And I see the same person flashing, 12, $1,300 cards just like 6 months later. And I forget if this was before COVID or afterwards, but yeah, we've seen some ridiculous growth for sure.
Yeah, $2,000 you can barely buy a case of cards anymore. Like
Oh
it
God.
used
Yeah.
to be. I mean, and that's kind of where I want to go next. Like, where does the market go from here? Is it still gonna fly high? Is it still gonna soar? Is it gonna drop to nothing? Is it just gonna correct a little bit? I mean, who knows? I mean, how quickly do people get priced out and get fed up? Or do just more and more people with money come in, or there's expectations, like you said, someone who used to only, their threshold was maybe $100 on a card, suddenly it's 1,000 because people see that perceived value, so it's not as big of a deal. It's like, okay, I'm dropping 1,000, but if I need to, I can get that $1,000 back kind of on demand, and quite honestly, possibly maybe turn it into 1,500 or so. I mean, there's obviously a lot of factors, but I mean, surely things can't continue to ascend forever, but I guess they could for a little while.
Yeah, I spent a little bit of time today actually looking at the Kobe Bryant tops rookie in a PSA 10, just because I've been kind of fascinated by some of the movements, and fortunately, the tools available to us in the hobby, like market movers and card ladder, I was able to get this data a lot quicker. But Kobe Bryant PSA 10 tops rookie before he died was about $200. He passes away, it turns into a $1,500 card, and then it retraces sharply down to 500. And then it goes from 500 to 2,000 a few months later, probably before the last dance. And then it drops from 2,000 to 1,500. And then it goes a few months later from 1,500 to 5,500. That was probably in October, November, I'm guessing. And then it drops quickly to 2,200 in December. And then most recently went from 2,200 to 10,000. And then it dropped over the last couple of weeks back down to 6,000. So I guess the patterns that I saw were when it drops precipitously, it's still at a higher point than where it started for like that phase. And at worst, it's like what the previous high was. So like when the drop happens, it's like not dropping below the previous high. It's either falling equivalent to the previous high or just above the previous high watermark. So it looks like if you're to compare this and look at like stocks or commodities, like it looks like pretty healthy market behavior, because it's establishing, it has to establish a new floor in order to find higher highs, and it's never dropping by more than like, well, I guess at the beginning, but recently hasn't dropped more than like 50 or 60%, which is peanuts unless you bought during that run up. Then you're kind of like, oh shit. But then you just wait till the next run up, which happens 2 or 3 months later. So I don't know if that's a sign of things to come, but I think like this type of correction behavior, I think it's healthy for sports cars. You'd see the same thing like the Michael Jordan PSA 9. I thought it was crazy that reached like high 80,000s, maybe about 90,000. Talking about the 86 Fleer, and that's down about 40% to maybe even 50%, close to like 47K right now. But 47K is a lot higher than where it started just a few months ago. So if you were to look at like the performance over 3 months, it's still up. Um, and then you can see the same thing with like LeBron. It's very similar, even though he's a modern player and he's affected by, technically should be affected by other factors like performance and how his team's doing. But yeah, I don't know if that's a sign of things to come, and that's only looking at the goats. The goats have done as a whole very well over the last few months. It seems like in January, and you probably saw this too, but everybody was focused on like the established goat-like players. Like goat kind of implies that there's only one for each sport. I feel like people are using a loose definition of goat to
Yeah,
to
there's certainly multiple goats in most people's mind, it seems.
Right. Like I heard somebody refer to Ovechkin as a goat for hockey, but if you look at most lists online, he's not like a top 10 all-time player. I know he's going to break a pretty important record pretty soon. People expect him to do that, but yeah. So I guess people are targeting the top 10 to 20 players of the sport. It seems like for some sports, maybe they just target the top one or two, and maybe that was a symptom of those players being undervalued relative to the guys that are on, like, the ultra modern guys that have hundreds of variations of rookie cards that have a ton of risk with them that aren't established yet. The Luka Doncic's of the world, the Juan Soto's, etc. Although we have seen some run up with the baseball season coming with a lot of those ultra modern players for baseball. I don't know, man. I mean, I was wrong last time when I tried to predict the future for the hobby, and I assume I'll be wrong this time. But I don't see like a crash being imminent this time, at least. I don't really see that being the case, unless you were to look at potentially an abundance of scarcity type thing going on with all the NFTs and all the attention kind of diluting the values from the main 4 to 5 core sports that we used to all collect and spend most of our money on, most of our time on, we were most interested in. Now you have people spending money on wrestling cards, F1 cards, surfer cards, sports card illustrated, you name it, Marvel. Pokemon was already a pretty established market, but all this stuff that you would never expected to see in PSA slabs, which I'm sure we'll see those coming back in about 16 months.
Yeah, it's there's certainly more sports getting attention, but I kind of feel like that's probably a good thing for the hobby. I do think some of the all-time greats should be fairly safe, especially with so many big players involved in the hobby nowadays. And we continue to call it a hobby, even though that is becoming a very loose definition or loose word to use. I think one of the problems with the previous crash, I think baseball was by far the number one sport at that time. I don't think the other sports got nearly as much attention or credit. And
Yep.
it wasn't just, I mean, obviously overproduction was a key and probably the key factor. Uh, and production numbers are going to continue to rise, but there's just so much more variety with short prints, with parallels, and all these different products that I don't think it's going to reach the substantial numbers that they did in the late 80s, early 90s. But it all kind of, at least from what I remember, it kind of correlated really strongly with the baseball strike in 94. I feel like that was another huge factor that some people sometimes don't really consider. At least that's my recollection of kind of things really going sour during that time. So I think that was a big factor too, with the last time things really took a major hit. And, that's what happens with a lot of stuff. People start panicking and they just drive the market down. And once the market's driven down, there's a certain percentage of people who are going to lose interest, because that's one of the driving forces of them being involved in the hobby. Of course, there's always going to be people who don't care about the money side of things. So we'll see what happens this time around. Obviously, things can't continue to rise forever, but there's probably a lot of room for growth. I mean, just think, it still really isn't at the same level of attention as it was years and years ago, 20 years ago, in terms of mainstream popularity. It's getting there. It's gaining more and more attention. But, I mean, obviously no one knows the future because, well, if we did, we'd, wouldn't make mistakes selling too early or selling too late.
And I kind of agree with you there. I remember the players strike, and I feel like the overproduction people kind of probably knew in the back of their minds. I know that the data wasn't out there, because you had to like go to a show to see the cards, and you couldn't like actually see how many were truly available globally or even within the country on eBay. But I think the strike was definitely part of it as well, and a lot of people overlook that. I think this time around, though, whenever the next bubble pops, I feel it won't be caused by overproduction, and I think Topps and Panini are starting to realize that too, and they're probably starting to be a little bit more, hot on the presses a little bit. Uh, but I think that there could be other things that could lead to a crash before overprinting would, and especially it's so hard to not overprint right now, just because people are going to buy this stuff and they're going to pay whatever it costs. You have group breakers now, which are an excellent tool to pretty much open everything and make sure that everything there's not like a box left behind. Everything gets opened. and the prices, people aren't as price sensitive now because of the advent of group breaking. But I think if there was a crash in the next 2 or 3 months, if I had to guess what it would be caused by, I might choose the abundance of slabbed cards and maybe junky type cards in slabs or junk slabs. Some people have referred to this era as the junk slab era. Um, some people have called it the refractor or parallel era. But I think sometimes, especially in the past, when the cost to grade was a little bit lower, I think people, as a market, have built in the cost of grading into any PSA 9 or PSA 10. I think people have made this mistake there, where they should let the market dictate what the values of those slabs should be. And I think that it's dangerous to do that because the longer we go on, the more obsolete, and it's almost like some of these players just fade into oblivion. They're just not hobby relevant anymore. So you shouldn't have to pay more than $10 for some of these slabs, even though the cost to grade them at the time was $10. And the card might have been worth $1, maybe it was worth $5, but raw it's worth $1 now. I just think it's kind of dangerous to allow the market cap to grow so quickly, so fast, with tens of millions of cards graded per year now. It seems like, and a lot of it is complete trash. Like, I brought this up in videos before, but I feel like probably 3 out of 4 people that submit to PSA, and I'm guilty, and maybe you are to an extent as well, but we'll submit multiple copies of the same card of guys that we don't plan to hold forever.
Nick
So
Senzel.
exactly. So when those come back, we plan on selling those as quickly as possible. So just think about like how much value is out there in the backlog. And a lot of people wait till the order comes back, and it's like a way for us to generate some cash flow to buy some stuff we actually like. I think PSA increasing their prices now to be like, whatever it was, like a 60% increase from what they were previously, and probably about closer to um, over 100% over the last like 14 months. I think that is a smart move. Whether they did it on purpose, probably not, but to allow people to separate market values of slabbed items versus what it costs to grade, which ends up being built into the market value itself. I don't know. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, if that was a little too deep, or maybe I didn't do a good job articulating it. But just because you paid $25 to grade something, even if you get a 10 in it, I don't think that should be necessarily worth $25. If it's like $1 or $2 raw, if it's something that really has no demand outside of the slab, if it's something that's either overproduced, or if there's a super high pop on it, or if it's something that just doesn't have a whole lot of demand, if the player just doesn't have a lot of demand outside the slab. I just
I mean,
sometimes
it's just
that
going to
that
be
kind of
interesting going
baffles me.
forward to see what like these prices will be, though, because obviously people send in less.
Right.
So I don't know, like if there's someone who's a decent rookie and there's only a couple of them on there because only a few people sent them in, I feel like they're gonna, this will be where they list them on eBay for like 99.99 or best offer, even though it should be like 25-30 bucks at most. And someone will most likely end up paying it because people still are gonna. I mean, it might take a while, but right now people are still addicted to having their cards in those slabs. So it's gonna be
Yeah,
interesting.
that's a good point. Yeah, if anything, it could boost up the prices of PSA 10s even more. I have no idea what happens. I just look back at like the time 3 or 4 years ago when the hobby was much simpler, and we all had like multipliers. Well, I did. I used a multiplier. I forget what it was at the time, but from a raw to a BGS 9.5 to a PSA 10, and it didn't matter to me. It didn't matter at all what the card was worth raw. If it was a $10 card raw, a $1 card raw, or a $150 card raw, you used to see the same multipliers of like 2 or 3x to get to a PSA 10. But over the last year, from raw to PSA 10 for a super like low end card, the multipliers are insane. It doesn't make any sense. It's because people are building in the cost of grading, and I just don't think that's smart. That's prudent to do in the long term for the hobby.
It's just amazing how expensive some PSA 9s have gotten, and not like super sensitive cards. I mean, even things like the Fernando Tatis Chrome Update rookie debut. that I know you touched on in a recent video. Like you look up some of the nines, and it's like I could easily buy that card raw, and it's not guaranteed to be a nine, but there's a very very good chance it's going to be a nine if it's not a 10. And I just see it's just crazy sometimes some of the prices you see.
Indeed.
I think another thing that'll be interesting, and of course this is a few years away, but all these young players right now that are being bought up, with this new wave of collector slash investor, and even just like the base rookie cards at like 30, 50, $100 for PSA 10s. What happens in 3 to 5 years if these guys don't pan out, if they're proven not to be superstars, borderline even stars. I mean, we've seen that come and go over the years too. I mean, you think about 20 years ago, some of the big guys in the hobby, and a lot of them are no longer big guys in the hobby. Your Kerry Woods, your Travis Lee, your Eric Chavez, your Miguel Tejada, some of those guys from like the late 90s. I mean, they were big time cards, and now they're just a couple dollars. So will that drive people away too and cause kind of some market changes if it drives those people away? So there's so many factors that go into it, of course.
Yeah, there's always a natural like hype curve attached to all players where they're valued or they're trading at or selling at a irrationally high level for the early part of their career, although they haven't proven much. They don't have a ton of accomplishments. But yeah, I see what you're saying. And I was talking to somebody earlier today. I saw on eBay a Buster Posey Bowman Chrome autograph first year. I think it was a BGS 9.5, maybe a BGS 9, but it was a blue number to 150, sold for under $1,000. And that's a guy that a lot of people think is going to be in the Hall of Fame someday. And then I also look at people on Facebook. If you go to any Facebook group that's baseball focused and you just drop in a line that says, "Hi, I'm looking for Bo Bichette," or "I'm looking for insert the player where they made their rookie debut within the last couple of years. I'm looking for Fernando Tatis Jr." And then you won't be able to even scroll to the bottom of how many people respond with different cards, different variations. There's just a ton of people that are sitting on these cards and hoping to cash in someday. So yeah, I mean, and Tatis might not be the right example because maybe he pans out and maybe he sustains some of these values. But if you're to compare Buster Posey and all of his meaningful cards, and you're to take like the market cap, so however many exist in each grade, and multiply it by the current market value, you add that across all of his rookie cards that exist or prospect cards that exist, and you compare that to a Bo Bichette and do the same exercise, like would the aggregate market cap of Buster Posey even exceed like 5% of Bo Bichette? Would it exceed 1% of Bo Bichette? Maybe not. And maybe there's, clearly there's close to 99 times as much demand for Bo Bichette right now. But in 5 years, in 10 years, and in 15 years, it would be very unlikely that was still the case.
Yeah, the hype train is definitely always on the young and up and coming players, generally speaking. And then you have guys like Albert Pujols who get kind of forgotten for a number of years, and rightfully so. He kind of wasn't. He obviously compiled great numbers, but was no longer really a relevant star player in baseball. Still, chugging along, putting up some numbers, but playing on the West Coast, not playing in the postseason, not putting up those MVP caliber seasons. Now, finally, some people have caught it. He's caught the collector's attention, and his stuff has certainly boosted up in value, especially his rookie stuff specifically, in the last few months. But sometimes these guys just kind of get lost in the hobby. They get forgotten about to a degree.
Yeah, Pujols was a great example of somebody that was undervalued and forgotten about. People forgot how good he was. He was what a lot of people consider the best right-handed hitter in their generation. Whether you consider Trout as part of that generation is a separate story, I guess. But yeah, MLB and other sources posted the first 10 years of his career versus Trout's career, compared them looking at just like the offensive numbers, and Pujols blew him out of the water. Pujols also had many more games played, many more at bats, because Trout got called up late in 2011. He was victimized by the he was part of the shortened season, of course, last year with COVID. But yeah, you can't take that away from Pools. And if you're to look at like the non-counting stats, like the OPS, the batting average, I believe, as well as the OBP, probably especially the OPS, and the slugging percentage, Pujols, yeah, he did very well. If you look at their 10 years, like with Fangraphs WAR, it's actually not that he's pretty close to Trout. Maybe they're like 10 points apart. But if you look at Baseball Reference WAR, calculated differently, then I think Pujols was around 100, probably in his career. Maybe not through his first 10 years, but there might be a wider gap with one of those measures. Yeah, so when like Trout's values, people saw like, wait, Trout's base rookie is how much, and his gold rookie is how much? So like, why shouldn't Pujols be half of that? What I have an issue with is why now are people realizing that? Like, we're further and further removed from him actually being a productive player. He's been an average or below average player. Pujols has for, you could argue, like the last 4 years, 6 years, maybe 6.5 years. And you can look at his first 10 years all you want, but at the end of the day, when we look back at the stat books 20 years from now, we're going to be evaluating him based on the total equation, based on his complete career accomplishments. One of the nice things about David Ortiz is that he didn't put up the same career numbers as Pujols, of course, but he played at a very high level late in his career. Was he helped by steroids? Probably, but was Pujols helped by steroids? Can you say definitively no? It's just so hard. And then when you start to like go back and forth on the steroids debate, then it always leads you to Barry Bonds and being like, damn, he was really good, huh?
It's I guess it's just interesting how the hobby just picks and chooses certain players to get excited about, and sometimes at odd times, and sometimes maybe it's just momentum building. Someone just kind of puts forward like, hey, this guy's a little cheaper, and then more and more people go, oh, you know what, you're right, and they just jump on it. And who knows, maybe there's some manipulation involved too. You can't really count anything out now because things have just been so nutty for the last year. I mean, anything you think can't happen, it somehow finds a way to happen. Things continue to just go bonkers, and you get to a point in time where David Portnoy, Allen and Ginter base cards start selling for $50, and then Allen and Ginter egg cards suddenly are $50. What is going on?
Right. Yeah, for sure. And it's crazy to see the pattern that started in early January, where this kind of explains Pujols and Ichiro a little bit. Like, they're like two of the more meaningful baseball players from the last 20 years. So I kind of get that. So it started with like the tier 1 guys, and then the tier 1A guys, or however you want to classify them. We saw that with basketball a bit too, with Tim Duncan. His cards went absolutely berserk, and everybody around him, probably Steve Nash, Dirk Nowitzki, and Vince Carter, and Allen Iverson. And man, I was watching some of the price increases with football, and like Montana's second-year card, Jerry Rice's second-year cards, insane, insane, like 5 to 6x. I feel like from December at some point. And I'm sure they've retraced a bunch, like some of the other cards we had talked about. But yeah, it's been crazy to watch. I think we both thought we saw historic jumps in market value like last April through July. And maybe even August with football, but like what happened in January and February, I think that's completely unprecedented.
Yeah, and like you said, it's all over. Obviously, the non-sport stuff has been trending upward as well, and soccer cards and all this stuff is going crazy, and that leads to one of the ways people acquire cards. Obviously, people like to break stuff, and breaking stuff, unless you're doing group breaks, which of course you're taking a chance all the time, but group breaks, you could get skunked with literally nothing. I mean, hobby boxes are, they're absolutely insane. You can't believe when you see like Donruss basketball dropping at $1,000 a box. Like, I feel like that would have been like an $80 product, if that, maybe even a $60 product, 5 years ago. And, of course, people are chasing retail. Some people are chasing retail because they just want something to break that's affordable at $20. Of course, a lot of people are chasing it because they know they can flip it almost immediately for $60, $80, $100. I know we talked about retail and the future of retail a few months ago on your channel, but I mean, is any thoughts on retail changed in your mind, or are we just kind of continuing to roll along? Because I don't see how we're gonna find anything more, see anything change in 2021 when I think it was Steel City. I saw they were pre-selling 2021 Topps Chrome baseball blaster boxes for like it might have been like $50 if I
Yeah,
saw that
50.
right.
Yeah, 50. Well, when we talked about it on my channel, the retail issues and what could happen in the future, I think you actually called it, and I was like, well, technically, Panini said that it's against Target Corporate to put limits on how much people buy, but clearly that's not the case. And that's happening. It's a store-specific thing. It seems it's very common in Target. I haven't been to maybe I've been to a Target once since we last spoke for other reasons. I haven't been to a Walmart. I think I've heard that Walmarts are dried up based on people complaining on Facebook and stuff. Um, it's funny. This is kind of off the topic, but on Facebook, people often complain that, oh, if people stopped buying these products from flippers, then we wouldn't have this issue to begin with. But it's like, you're not seeing the big picture. We all want and or need product. And even if we don't need it as much as you or the next guy, like we need a way to acquire it. We feel like we need a way to acquire it. And how else are we going to get it if hobby is unaffordable and if there's nowhere else to get it other than paying higher prices from people that got the product either by luck, using a bot, stalking the vendors, abusing their limit, or however else they got it. I don't care. I just need it at the end of the day. You know, for me, I need it for my repack product. If I'm going to look at it from the mindset of I'm a dealer and I'm a flipper, I need it to stay competitive with other people doing the same thing. And it's not, you can't fight City Hall in that one. But yeah, retail doesn't seem to be any better than it was. And unfortunately, and I'm seeing this as I have a subscription box offering, the rookie card explosion boxes I just brought up really quickly. And with that, I'm noticing that people are dropping their subscriptions. I've lost more in the last 2 months than I have prior, for a reason other than price increase month, or the last time was really COVID, where I've noticed like a lot of people dropping out. With COVID, it was probably obviously economic related, but this time, and people are sending me messages for why they're leaving. You know, Phil, I really like your product. I had a blast opening it. It's not the pricing, it's not the product. It's that I've decided to scale back, or it's that I've decided that I'm going to leave the hobby, or I'm going to have to really decide like what I want to focus on, or this has just gotten too expensive for me and I don't know what to do. So I've got to eliminate one thing, which, you know, they're eliminating opening wax, which I completely respect that. I get it. But it's unfortunate because the people that are, you know, getting the retail, there's either not enough where they have to mark up prices, or they're just marking up prices. And yeah, I mean, it's something that it might not affect me directly, but it certainly affects me indirectly with people leaving the hobby. And that's not a good thing for anyone if people are getting priced out. It's not. Like, collectors are very important to this hobby. They're the stickiest part, you know, because the investors at the end of the day have a time horizon. It might be 5 years, might be 10 years, might be 15. You know, their plans to sell at some point. And the collectors don't think of it that way at all. And we know that because we have a lot of friends that are collectors, and you're a collector.
Yeah, I mean, collectors are the most important part of the hobby because if there's no one collecting, then there's no one to pay those prices that people are looking to sell them for. So hopefully, you know, most people who drop off are temporary, but we'll see how things develop. It'll be interesting to see going forward, at least with baseball stuff, because from what I've noticed, basketball, of course, is the first thing that's out the door with the retail stuff, right? If there's a limit, first choice is basketball, second choice is the football products, you know, at least the semi higher end ones, and then baseball kind of comes in third, generally speaking. Of course, it's going to depend product to product, but I mean, that being said, 2021 Topps, you can find it if you're, you know, hustle around or if you check often, because it won't necessarily be gone within 10 seconds of it going out, but it's not going to last more than a day. It'll be interesting to see what happens with some lower end products, something like Topps opening day, which I'm sure is, a few weeks, if not less, away from being released. And even products like Gypsy Queen and stuff like that, that Topps Heritage, usually pretty accessible at retail, but I got to imagine it won't last because even those prices are up. So we'll see, but the premium products for sure will continue to be as difficult as they have been, in my opinion.
Yeah, and market values of products that were released within the last year um, kind of justify the more recent print run increases by the manufacturers. Like I think a lot of us balked at 2019 Topps Chrome Update. Oh, they printed 67% more than 2018, but 2018 had a real nice rookie class, and 2019 has nothing except for Vlad and a few debuts. And that product sat at Target, as we both know, for a few months. You could have gotten it at Target during discount periods or $15 a blaster. And now that's up 6 to 7 times, $120 within 13, 14 months at least. Maybe even in a shorter span, it's up like 6x. It's $120 now for a blaster of what was supposed to be, or what we all tagged as a garbage product. People on Blowout said they wouldn't open it, and they produce too much, and that's so dumb of Topps to do that. But like, if you print if you print less than what they're printing, then it's not going to make the situation any better for the folks that are getting priced out and leaving the hobby because they can't find affordable product. It's the exact opposite of what those people want and need. Actually,
It's going to be interesting what happens going forward. I feel like there's more wax being hoarded than ever. I mean, obviously, there's always people who save wax and don't break it. And you can find, if you look hard enough or you're willing to spend enough, you can find wax from the 50s. It's pretty rare, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this current day stuff because I feel like there's a lot of people who in the last year or two have been kind of just buying up stuff, and they might sell some stuff here and there. They might open some stuff, but they're kind of saving a lot of it. And what happens as that stuff starts to come to market more and more, or has enough of it just vanished that and there's such a demand that it does continue to rise. I mean, you look at some of the Panini Prism basketball boxes from a few years ago, and it's like, it's mind-numbing how expensive a value slash cello pack, or even the blaster boxes, $20 packs that sell for like $500-$600. It's crazy. I mean, I remember seeing, Prism basketball from a few years ago all over a Walmart. I mean, at this point, the probably would have been like $30,000 profit if I could go back in time and buy it. And it's just like the retail stuff is bonkers, and it's a whole new game. I mean, Prism football used to sit on the pegs, the value packs, for weeks on end. You could buy a pack, 2-3 times a week if you were happen to be in a store often enough. It's a whole new world.
yeah, it's interesting to think about, like, people always try to outsmart other people in the hobby by zagging versus zigging, et cetera, and being a better prospector than everybody else. Getting to that, acting on information before other people, and being good at picking out cards and grading them for money. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of skill. The learning curve steep. This whole time, you could have just sat on like retail wax from 2012, 2013. That would have been a better strategy than probably almost anything you could think of. And you know what? Even 2014 wax, 2015 wax, 16 wax, maybe not for all sports, clearly, because of draft classes and such. But like, you look at like a strategy like holding all of Topps Chrome baseball, like any year, any configuration, that stuff has disappeared. It's gone. And I think you brought up something like, if you had still had your stash of wax, it'd be worth 30K. I think those rising increases, those parabolic rising or exponential increases over time, that's enough to hopefully like get some of those people, those hoarders that have all that wax, all those stashes, to come out of their caves to finally sell those things. So it's the greatest mystery. We'll never know for sure. Unless something crazy happens, we might know sooner rather than later. But I don't know. I think the stuff like retail wax from the Zion year, if you're to look at like the Prism and the optic stuff, the stuff that from a retail perspective, even a hobby, it's already like gone 5x, 6x, 7x, some cases 10x maybe. I don't think there's really a whole lot left just because people would have had a chance to sell in like triple, 4X. Like even the people that bought from the original flippers who had made 3 to 4X, there's been like multiple sets of people in that lineage that have been able to 3 or 4X their money, it seems. So yeah, but there's certain products from the Zion year like well, Hoops, the Hoops premium brand, the Chronicles, and some of the other stuff that came out later is a little bit more mass produced. You haven't seen those crazy increases yet from where they started. From a secondary market perspective, the prices have been somewhat close to where they started, maybe, or even a little less, a little more. There's probably a ton of that stuff, and I think Panini and I've seen them on YouTube videos admit the amount of they admitted like the I forget what the context was or what they said exactly, but something like more than triple the amount of retail from the Luca year to the Zion year. From 18 to 19, they more than tripled, if not quadrupled, maybe even more, the print run for some of the retail configurations of some of that wax.
Yet it all still vanishes away, and the prices aren't cheap. So there's still
Yeah.
obviously plenty of demand for it right now, and I think part of that is the ridiculous prices of hobby products. Are just, I mean, it's unbreakable. I mean, like optic football, I used to break a couple boxes every year just for fun, and it's like I remember paying like $60 to $80, and this year optic football was like $800 a box. I was like, nah, it's all right. I'll pass. There's
Yeah.
no reason.
Yeah.
No reason. You're like
Yeah.
legitimately gonna get, you theoretically would get like $50 worth of cards. I mean, maybe some of the rookies are worth a little more, and of course you could hit that, $2,000 card. But if you're expecting to hit that $2,000 card, you're gonna be quite disappointed very, very often.
Yeah. One of the hard things I think about the new PSA prices and grading prices across the board right now aren't as cheap as they were 6 months ago for sure. CSG, I think, has a pretty decent bulk rate going on with no subgrades, but we'll see how long that lasts. The current prices for the top grading companies being like 20 to 25 to $30 a piece, and that's like the bulk rate. That's like the ultra modern rate. I think it's going to hurt if it hasn't already. Some of the lower end products, where most of the value that you get back from it is comprised of base cards and base cards that might no longer make sense to send to PSA with any service level or any other grading company for that matter. So if you think about like Top Series 1, Top Series 2, and Topps Update, like not saying these products won't hold value, just saying that people are going to think about them differently. Me, for instance, I decided not to open a jumbo case because I'm like, yeah, I could sell these raw, but I'm sure the values in raw form have dropped over the last 4 weeks or whenever it was released because there's a higher supply in the market with the same demand. So prices would make sense that they would drop. Do I really want to wait like 14 months or whatever to get these things graded? And, it's going to be even harder to recoup my money because of that cost. I might hit a parallel, but the chances of hitting a meaningful parallel are few and far between. But if you compare that with like Topps Chrome, especially Bowman products, most of the value from Bowman is usually in the parallels or in the autographs. You used to be able to say that with Topps Chrome, but you don't really get too many refractors anymore, and the autos tend to not be so good. And there's a lower floor on Topps Chrome autographs, rookie autographs versus Bowman, I feel. But maybe the pendulum will swing a little bit more in Bowman's favor. Not saying it'll be a better value than Topps even after price increases with regards to what you rip. But I'm saying the gap will have shrunken, and you could maybe make the same argument with, say, football, looking at Donruss or even Prism or Optic versus Select or Contenders. I don't know if you have any thoughts there.
I mean, it makes sense. A lot of that value in even base Topps cards was, ripping the hot rookies and sending them off, getting them graded for 7, 8, $10, getting them back in a couple months, and obviously you're gonna have a few guys that don't work out, but even them, you can generally recover your money. But the big guys, as of late, even last year was kind of a special circumstance because of PSA closing down. There wasn't a whole lot in the market, but I mean, Kyle Lewis cards were selling for like $100 easy. Some of the other lower tiered rookies, 50, $60. I mean, Brendan McKay at one point was like, and Nico Horner, they were like 35, $40 in PSA 10s. But I mean, if you're spending $25 to grade cards, I guess there'll be less supply, but it's definitely a hell of a chance to take. If you're sending one or two cards and you feel really good about them, it's not a big deal. But picking out 6 rookies and sending 10 of each, 60 times 25 plus a year wait, and who knows what happens to those players, doesn't
Right.
really make a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah. It's one thing if you're opening up like 2019 Series 2 and you see what the current market values of those players are, and you see that they're more established. They've all made their major league debuts, and a lot of them have played in at least one full season. 2018 Topps update, and a lot of these guys have PSA 10s that justify the values of sending them to PSA already, and you kind of know, like, they're not going to sink below a certain level. You're paying a lot more for those products, but I don't think this really affects them, the PSA price increase. Where it could is like what you said, the 2021 Series 1, there's a bunch of rookies. You don't really know which one's going to lead the class. I have an idea of who might, and I guess we'll talk about that in a little bit, but you don't really know. There's a lot of depth, but you might be sending the wrong guys in, and that could cost you down the line and tie up your capital along the way as you wait.
Yeah, and the long wait times doesn't help. You take that gamble if you're getting it back in 2 months, because at least you have a season or maybe a hot streak to capitalize on it. But if you have to wait a year, that's kind of a tough pill to swallow. Real quick, just want to kind of roll through some of kind of the state of grading right now. We've touched on this a little bit, even just a few seconds ago, a little bit, but I mean, I'd say there's 6 main grading companies. Obviously, PSA is the established top grading company. Whether you consider them the best at it or you trust them the most, either way, like regardless, there's no way you can state that they are not by far the most popular of the grading companies, and their resale value, their market price, just shows that, and that's why they were able to increase prices substantially once again, and they still have a monster backlog, and of course a lot of things going on with the company with the sale and such. SGC just had a price increase. They're up to $25. They've obviously been around a long time. They are the leader for sure in pre-war. You can make the case vintage as well. They've made their mark a little bit with modern. A lot of people sending stuff in. They're at $25, which is quite expensive and obviously much more than it was just, again, a few months ago. But right now, their turnaround time about 25 days. So if they can keep to that, there is some value to paying that price and getting the cards back that quickly. BGS, they continue to kind of roll along. They certainly were, at least it feels to me like they've decreased in popularity over the last couple years. I don't know if that's true or if it's just kind of my own perception. I feel like they were a bigger deal, but obviously they're still getting tons of business because they're still like an 8-month wait. They increased their prices a bit. I think their cheapest price now is like $20, and a lot of the levels are 30 and 40, and of course the high price stuff is just crazy priced. We touched on HGA a little bit. I mean, $20 to get in at the slowest service, if you can get in, due to the way they have things going, kind of creating demand as they cap the number of submissions per week. A lot of their services are $30 and $40. They look great, but I don't know how established their grading is. I think it's going to take a while to kind of figure out how accurate and how consistent and how good they are at grading, but certainly people love the look of the slabs, and sometimes, especially with less seasoned collectors, it's just whatever looks shiniest, is the best, and people throw money at it. CSG, they do a lot of stuff. Big company, do paper currency, comic books, coins, whole ton of stuff. They've gotten into the trading card game, the sports trading card. grading game, and I think they probably wish they started a month or two later because they are now the cheapest option on the block. They do $8 bulks, so I would assume they will have a monster backlog soon, and they will have to double and triple prices soon. I think their standard service is like $15, and then obviously they have other levels and little things you can tack on as well. And even GMA, who takes a lot of criticism, they're now, I think for $10 is their cheapest price, and it's a 90-day turnaround. I think their standard service is like 50 or 60 days at $12. I will say they do, I believe, have new labels in the work, new flips, and they actually look pretty professional. So they at least will look better. That current flip is not very good, and take it for what it will, whether you believe in their grading or not. But Phil, any thoughts on the state of grading? I know you gave some thoughts already on the price increases and how they were to be expected and probably necessary. But with these 6 companies that get the most attention out there, is there any one that kind of interests you more than the others? Or obviously we know PSA is kind of, they've established themselves for now as number one for sure and for the foreseeable future, but certainly things can change. But just wanted to get your thoughts on some of these companies and how much more room is there for potentially other companies to jump in.
Well, I think GMA's current wait time of 90 days tells us all we need to know. Yes, there's room for more companies to come in. But so PSA versus Beckett's very interesting. Clearly, PSA has been getting more business than Beckett. They're cranking out more slabs than Beckett, and they have a longer backlog, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Resale values, we kind of know where they stand. We see the momentum is in favor of PSA. There have been a lot of people that have seen, the multiplier of PSA 10 versus BGS 9.5 continue to expand. I remember when I got back into the hobby in full swing in 2014, the BGS 9.5 was very similar to the price of a PSA 10. And if anything, it'd be like a 10% difference. And I'm not talking like a true gem BGS 9.5. I'm talking like a, minimum gem. Well, now for almost all sports, baseball is probably the last one with Bowman Chromes. A lot of Bowman Chrome collectors prefer BGS slabs. Now you're seeing like 2x in a lot of cases. I thought it always made sense for like the 80 stuff, right? Really anything before 2000 where PSA is known to be a bit more strict than most of the other grading companies. But yeah, the 2x thing, I see people on Facebook saying like, well, I'm going to keep on buying BGS 9.5s because they're undervalued versus PSA 10s. Well, they're probably not wrong. BGS is a pretty good grading company, and technically a 9.5 is a gem mint on their scale. But my issue with that is, what if Beckett stays undervalued? And I'm specifically talking about 9.5s here, although you could make a similar argument for BGS 9s versus PSA 9s. I can't see anything that would point to the gap narrowing between a 9.5 and PSA 10. You look at the two companies, you really just look at senior leadership, even before the buyout with Nat Turner. But now, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer that PSA just has a stronger company with a, maybe better priorities that are more in line with what the hobby wants, better capacity to make change, and to get ahead and to scale. So yeah, I'm not really feeling too bullish about BGS 9.5 right now, except when it's a low population card. I feel like in some cases it's just buy the fucking card. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to drop that. Just buy the card with like some of the stuff that's numbered to 500 or 1,000 and fewer, where there's very few PSA 10s in existence. Yeah, I'll continue to buy 9.5s over PSA 9s because there's a lot fewer of them, and for the most part, they're cards in better condition and they're more sought after now, and I think they always will be, regardless of what happens at Beckett. Also, BGS pristines. People laugh; they say it's a gimmick. Probably more so towards the BGS Black Label pristine, I guess. And I can kind of see that argument a bit, but like BGS pristines, a lot of the times they'll be like 5% or 10% as many versus PSA 10. Not in all cases. Sometimes they'll be half as many or a third as many, but in cases where BGS 10 pristines are far outnumbered by PSA 10s, I think that BGS pristines are a good candidate to go after. Like you look at like Juan Soto, 2018 Topps update or Topps Chrome update. Like that's a good example. And I think you would have seen like actually a multiplier increase between 10 versus 10 over the last year. And a lot of that has to do with the print runs probably being a little bit more lopsided with regards to, you know, the BGS pristine rate versus the PSA 10 rate, and however many are getting sent in. I guess you could make an argument that BGS is just a little less popular, but let that be for now. But the other grading companies, so CGC is interesting. A lot of people are focused on HGA right now because they're flashy, and you know, the CEO was a very interesting character, and a lot of people thought that he was genuine. That have seen him on other people's like live streams, podcasts, etc., videos. Seems like a nice guy. The AI thing, I think that has drawn a lot of people in. I think it's unquestionably a fact now that the AI bit was a little bit misleading in that, you know, they don't really have a whole lot of artificial intelligence right now. I think they're actually trying to build out software right now. Don't know the exact details on there. So at the risk of being wrong, I'll stop there. But I think it's more about the subgrades, which actually provides more like validation to Beckett's grading system. The fact that not just them, it's CSG, they're bringing subgrades to the table. I don't know if it's the exact same structure as Beckett. I've seen like weird overall ratings versus like the subs. I know they're grading the same 4 criteria, but I don't know how they do like the calculation to find the overall grade. It might be a little bit different for CSG, but I think that is something that we ultra modern folks really like to see, the subgrades, because as the two of us know, Mike, like a PSA 10 versus a PSA 9, there could be a lot that makes up that difference. There could be, and I know we both like kind of like the SGC 9.5 tweener grade in between, because you know, a lot of cards, 80-90% of cards are going to be graded at least a PSA 8, maybe 60 to 70% of ultra modern cards are going to be graded at least a PSA 9 or BGS 9. So it's nice to have something in between, because there's a spectrum there for sure. So CSG is interesting also because I think they got some help. They hired graders directly from Beckett, so I think that helps. They might have more experience now technically than SGC on the modern side. I'm not sure, but you know, SGC is more known around vintage, and I don't know who their, you know, head graders are and what their experience is on the modern and ultra modern side. So CSG I think is a nice dark horse. You know, maybe the slabs aren't as nice looking, but a lot of the times it's an acquired taste. I've always felt like PSA was an acquired taste for most people in the hobby. I don't think the slabs are too pretty with like the bright red. I know you'd probably disagree with me there, but yeah, HGA, you talked about it, Mike. They're controlling their demand, or not? They're controlling the supply right now. So the supply demand equation is like lopsided in their favor. So, and it's almost like warranting that their market values sell for close to PSA 10, just because there's more that people want than can have those slabbed cards in the secondary market or the ones that they're grading themselves. So we'll see how long that lasts. You know, I don't see it changing in the immediate future because I think they're going to really slowly ramp up their business, and what they're grading is so far below SGC, Beckett, and PSA now from a volumes perspective. Speak a little bit about SGC now. They really squandered an opportunity last year, I would argue, with the modern business. You know, they asked for it. They said they were ready for it, and all of a sudden they were underwater. They were overwhelmed. Talked to one guy. They said that they had to scale 10x in a few weeks. One guy said they scaled 10x over the course of 3 months. I don't know what happened. I know they suffered a lot of turnover, working long hours. I don't know how rewarding that was, but you know, they're at the point where their vintage reputation might be vulnerable to reputational impact if they screw up again from the modern side and getting completely overwhelmed. You know, with PSA, sure, their turnaround times suck. They're terrible. They're dreadful, but they've never 2x'd or 3x'd over the course of 2 or 3 weeks. You know, that type of people have like a built-in expectation. And with SGC, flippers were sending stuff to them because they thought that, their time was valuable and at least they'd be able to get in and out of their position quite quickly. Well, that proved to not be the case because when they tried to sell their items, they weren't very liquid. So you had to auction them and they weren't selling for nearly as much as PSA when you auctioned them. So it was kind of a tough situation. Yeah, people really value that time aspect with SGC. And I think a lot of people, including me, I was like, well, I'll only submit to SGC because I know they're twice as fast as PSA or 3 times as fast. But when you're taking, 5-6 months, that's no longer fun. That's no longer cool, especially when the resale values are what they are. And I get that it's going to take some time for those to adjust. Maybe they never adjust. Who knows? But so I was willing to give them a little bit of slack there. But I think there was a PSA price increase in like midsummer, maybe July, and then they didn't adapt fast enough. They could have done one of two things. They could have told people that their service levels were going to change. Probably the better decision would have been to increase prices to slow down the amount coming in. But I think it took them 2 or 3 weeks to kind of get their heads out of the water, to apologize to people and say like, yeah, we really screwed up. Customer service is dead. You know what? Good for them because they did have customer service for a few months. And most of these grading companies, the more established ones, are complacent and have not had responsive people at all. So with SGC, I think people are ready to give them one more chance from an ultra modern perspective. But if they squander the next opportunity, that business might go somewhere else next time.
Yeah, I think the increased prices should because who knows in today's market and who knows with the behavior. You can't really predict the behavior of people entering the hobby now because, I mean, who would have thought some of the prices we see on people spending on different items? But I think with the price increase, that should make most people. I know for me personally, I will certainly be more selective in what I send. And, if it's something that is of a decent value for my collection that I want to get it back in a month or so, of course, I'm going to send it there and get it right back. And if it's certain cards that have, a decent value, again, obviously you're not going to be sending $10 cards. That just doesn't make sense. But if you have, $150 cards, $200 cards, if you can send them and get them back, and you're not really worried about maximizing the value of what it might get from PSA, like it certainly makes sense because at least you'd have it back this baseball season. If you have baseball right now and you're sending it off to PSA, I mean, you're probably not getting it until spring training next year, in all honesty. So we'll see how things develop. But, I mean, there's options, and we need options, and there's obviously plenty to go around. I think the thing with HGA right now, people are just, again, of course, I understand like the limited supply and such, but a lot of people, they're just saying, oh man, the holders look so nice, the labels look so nice, and most do. But I don't hear people talking about the quality of grade, so I kind of wonder how many, non-established collectors and flippers are really thinking about that. I've seen a few polls on Twitter like, oh, which are you more interested in, or which would you rather slab with, HGA or CSG? And it's like 70% HGA, and I'm just like, based on what? Like, I understand neither of them have a lot of slabs on the market, but putting a lot of blind faith in those grades there. So we'll see how. Obviously, it takes time to see things kind of unfold.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in all these Facebook groups and I see people being like reacting to I don't know if they're just promoting HGA, but they're reacting to the resale values and they show a picture of two comps like a Luis Robert versus the PSA 10. And it's like, yeah, we get it. It's limited sample size, okay? Grading is tough. It's going to be an uphill battle for them. Like, let's not make any judgments on them yet. Let's try to collect a little bit more information before we start to overreact based on an example of a couple comps. But you know what? Good for them. So far, what they're doing is working, and they've had, other than the mistakes they've made on like flips, misspelling names, and getting players wrong and stuff like that, I think overall they would say that their first few months have been successful.
Yeah, so far so good, and plenty of new grading developments, I'm sure, to come. We'll see how all these companies continue to handle the influx of grading. I mean, I, I don't see the demand for grading really going away. I think it's just going to shift. I'm sure, certain companies are going to get bombarded, and will they be able to handle it? We'll see. Before we wrap things up here, Phil, obviously the 2021 baseball season is coming up. We're only a few short weeks away, and then they'll be back on the field hopefully for a full season. That's the way things are planned to be and look. Just want to get your thoughts on the 2021 rookie class, specifically the rookie card class. Obviously, Series 1 baseball has been out for a few weeks. You got a few guys that people are chasing. You got a lot of other guys that people are kind of thinking about because there's just that appetite to kind of chase and look at different rookie cards and prospect. And I'm sure Series 2 and Topps Update will have plenty as well. We had a lot of guys make Major League debuts last year, so there should be plenty of rookies to choose from in 2021. Any standouts to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a few. I'd say like the top three guys for me would be Dylan Carlson, Mountcastle, then probably Alec Boehm. I know as a Phillies fan, you probably put Boehm probably at the top of the list, but I like probably Carlson the most because he's got power to all fields. He's got a nice, easy, short swing. He can play all three outfield positions. He's got a little bit of speed too. I think he could have a pretty good year. You could argue he broke out in like the last couple weeks. I don't know how good the pitching competition was, but he had a pretty good September, I believe, last year. Mountcastle's the next guy I said. Really, really good power hitter. And he can probably hit for average too. And the walk rate last year in a limited sample size in the majors is higher than what he showed in the minor leagues. So he could be an interesting one. Good ballpark there with Mountcastle and Alec Boehm. I don't know how much power is in his profile. So if you look at like the expert like metric systems or projection systems, like they don't really have him for more than 25 home runs. I was talking to Ed Westgriff a little bit yesterday, and I guess if he does like muscle up a little bit, he's got like a wiry frame, but if he adds some muscle, then maybe he can hit more home runs. I know he hit the ball really hard last year. His average is really high. I just don't know how much of that was a like symptom of a small sample size and maybe some batted ball luck. Christian Pache, he's interesting because like I compare him to Francisco Lindor in that when they were minor leaguers, they weren't really expected to hit for power. Their main attribute was main contribution was supposed to be from the defensive side, but Pache, he's a guy that some people think will develop power in the majors, and as a like plus defender, that could be a very meaningful player. Joey Bart strikes out too much, but insane hitting talent. He's a little bit older. Universal DH should help him. He's a catcher, and there's a lot of pitchers in the product that I would stay away from right now for the most part, like Luis Patino, Nate Pearson. Ian Anderson, I probably like the most. He showed a decent amount last year. Sixto Sanchez could be pretty good. Probably won't get a whole lot of strikeouts. The other guys in the product, Nick Madrigal, great contact hitter, but might not ever hit more than like 10 home runs in a season. So he could be interesting because he could have some like pretty high average years. Andres Jimenez is somewhat interesting. Luis Garcia might be one of the younger rookies in the class. And if he can emulate Juan Soto and take some things from him, which I think that's what he's modeling his swing after, then there's not many more guys to imitate. And we saw that with, was it Nick Castellanos and JD Martinez kind of did that with Miguel Cabrera. They had some pretty good success there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of players, a lot of depth, so it should at least provide some interesting watching and development this year. There's usually a couple guys that kind of come out of nowhere, guys who overperform, so that could spike some values. Joe Adell, did you mention him? Like, what are your thoughts on Joe Adell? I know he struggled quite a bit last year, but
yeah, I didn't have the list in front of me, but yeah, I should have brought up Joe Adell. He's got a lot of struggles right now with seeing breaking balls. Something we see a lot from young hitters. Something that sometimes they make adjustments with, and sometimes it takes them longer. Sometimes they never figure it out. But Joe Adell, of all the players in the class, probably has the most well-rounded skill set. maybe the highest ceiling too. He didn't really do it in the minor leagues, but he's a guy that people expect at some point, still really young, but they expect him to eventually contribute with power. Center fielder with I think he has a cannon of an arm, I believe. So eventually Mike Trout won't play center field anymore, and might be able to hit for average. I mean, right now the Angels, I think, at least the last time I checked, they kind of needed a leadoff hitter. I don't know if David Fletcher is that now, but he's not going to be the leadoff hitter anytime soon with his on base percentage. I mean, he's a guy that strikes out even in the minor leagues like 3.5 times more than he walked. That's like Luis Robert level, and usually not a successful equation that translates to success in the majors, at least right away. So he's got some adjusting to do. I don't know if he's going to be useful this year. He's probably going to start in the minor leagues. Maybe he figures it out eventually. A lot of these guys with these high ceilings, coming in as a top 2 or 3 overall prospect, they do figure it out unless there's some injury issue. But sometimes it just takes a little bit longer for some folks.
Yeah, and there's a lot to look forward to in, the baseball rookie card class because we got Brian Hayes. He had a really strong, brief. Of course, everyone sees him as brief in 2020, but I believe he'll be in Series 2 tops and, of course, other products going forward. And then there's just this stack of guys that may or may not make major league debuts, and depending on when they do, could see themselves in potentially a tops update. Wander Franco, will he come up this year? Will he come up early enough? Obviously, the Rays didn't find it necessary or him important enough to be part of the postseason / World Series roster last year, even though he was eligible, which, God knows they could have used any offense that they could have gotten. Jared Kelenic, he's been a kind of a top prospect for a while, but really getting a lot of attention in Seattle. Julio Rodriguez, is he someone that could make the jump this year? So there's a lot of really big names that we could still potentially see in products. Andrew Vaughn, I think Andrew Vaughn has a chance to make the team. I'm not sure how he's performed in spring training, but I know there was a lot of talk of him being part of the White Sox opening day roster, at least at one point. So, if that were to happen, he'd be like a Series 2 candidate. So just, stacks of young players. And obviously, as we talked about earlier in the show, people love the GOATs and they love the young guys who have shown flashes of brilliance but really haven't proven themselves. That seems to be where the attention in the hobby often goes. So with that being said, I mean, the baseball products could be pretty interesting this year. Probably expensive, of course, but a lot of players to kind of keep an eye on. And, sometimes there's a chance to pick up singles when everyone's, forking over money for breaks or boxes or, jumping on slab cards. Sometimes you might be able to pick up some of these guys raw, fair prices.
Yeah. Jared Kelenic, he's one to keep an eye on because, prior to the GM Mather, whatever his name was, saying the ridiculously dumb things publicly, well, I guess it was privately, but they got leaked, about manipulating service time with several players. In Kellenic's case, particularly, he's a guy that, despite him having very few games of experience in A-ball, it's not fair to say that because of last year with COVID. He made some real strides last year too. He beefed up. Kellenic's a guy to watch. Now, he recently hurt himself abductor strain. I don't know how serious that is. I assume opening day would have been in jeopardy regardless because it wasn't a sure thing that he was going to be in the roster. But keep an eye on him because if he gets called up sometime in April, he could probably miss Series 2, but he could be in Topps Chrome. And then maybe all of a sudden the $50 price point for blasters at Steel City, maybe that's not a bad price to pay. Given Brian Hayes is also in that product who you mentioned, guy that nobody's talking about. Doesn't help that he's on the Pirates. But if you look at his Bowman Chrome autograph, it's in, I think, 2015 Bowman draft. It's selling for the same price basically as Dylan Carlson, who I call the top guy in Series 1. So who knows? I mean, this could be a rare year, kind of like 2018, where Series 1, Series 2, and Update are all strong products. Wander Franco, he gets called up. Like you said, they could have really used him last year towards the end of the season as well as the playoffs. The fact that they didn't use him, it shows that they're probably preserving his playing time. They had no intention of him starting this year because they want that extra year, which means that he's going to have to wait a couple weeks into April. But he's also a guy where it's not just about the control, it's also about the money. So that's where the Super 2 deadline comes into play, which is in early June. And Tampa Bay it has shown the knack to wait longer than just about any team in calling up their prospects, no matter how ready or developed they are. And so we might have to wait till June for Wander, which means that, unfortunately, there'd be a good chance that he misses all of this year's flagship releases, which would suck, but it's a real possibility, I think.
Well, at least you can look forward to the Tops Now call-up card and then, him headline in 2022 Top Series 1.
Whatever sells product.
Yeah, well, anyway, Phil, it's been a blast talking for an hour and 20 minutes, kind of going over this crazy hobby that, just continues to excel, and we'll see what the future holds. Hopefully we do another episode a little quicker than this one. Took a full year to get back together, but hope to, maybe chat a couple months into the baseball season and kind of reevaluate how things have developed and how they're going.
Yeah, definitely would like to get back on here, Mike. Thanks for having me on. I had a blast.
All right, Phil, thanks for joining again. Thank you to everyone listening. Appreciate you taking some time out of your day to listen to the show. Check out Phil's channel over on YouTube. It's Philmington. You can check it out. There'll be a description in the YouTube link to this. And, of course, if you're listening on any of the other platforms, check out YouTube. Another great part of the hobby. A lot of information to be found, especially over on Philmington's channel. Have yourselves a great one.